Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com, a new podcast where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Ronan Murphy and I'm wondering how long we can keep saying that this is a new podcast before it's no longer a new podcast. This week I'm joined by Bairner, who is back to talk to us, the European football expert. He's been featured on the likes of the BBC, he's written for the Blizzard, he's obviously the chief editor of Football Transfers, so I'm very pally with Robin, and he is filling in once again while Duncan continues his exotic travels around Europe. I think when I was speaking to him this morning, he said he was getting ready to board the flight home, so good news, he'll be back soon, but until then you're stuck with me and Robin. How are you, Robin?
Yeah, I'm really good, and just hoping I can do Duncan some justice in this podcast.
Well, fingers crossed. I have every faith in us both to do 75% as good a job as Duncan. So yeah, when he listens back, he can give us some feedback. So this week we were thinking that we would cover El Clasico and the transfer earthquake that has come with the shock El Clasico, or maybe in some cases the not shock El Clasico result at the weekend, and how it has changed the transfer plans for every major club kind of across Europe. And those 90 minutes are going to be huge for the transfer market in January and further forward. And then obviously we're all our Twitter and social media is all talking about the Ballon d'Or results since, and has forgotten somewhat of the Clasico, but we haven't forgotten, so we're going to keep talking about it. So yeah, I suppose the biggest kind of takeaway is there pressure on Ancelotti, and what kind of happens next for Real Madrid from it. But some of the pressure maybe might have spurred Man United into making the move of their own, because they've now appointed a new manager, or set to appoint a new manager, and with Real Madrid kind of sniffing around and on the hunt for a manager themselves, Man United had to kind of get one of the best upcoming coaches in the game, or at least he thinks so himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows what a special and unique club Real Madrid are, that Carlo Ancelotti suddenly finds himself under pressure after one poor result. I mean, to put it into context, this is Real Madrid's first home loss since April 2023. It's just their third match lost inside 90 minutes since May 2023. So although it was a real collapse from Real Madrid, I guess you would call it, it just shows how quickly things in Madrid can turn, and at the Bernabeu. And of course, the big story in Madrid this summer was Kylian Mbappe joining the club, and that seems to have destabilised Madrid somewhat, because Ancelotti is now expected to fit Vinny Jr., Bellingham and Mbappe into the same team, having lost Toni Kroos. And it just seems that a lot of the balance that Real Madrid had last season, and has been such a strength in the team under Ancelotti, has been lost. And it's almost like Carlo Ancelotti, if you like, is collateral damage of this Mbappe move, which some sources in Spain believe was mostly motivated by Florentino Perez wanting to get a prestige signing in the summer. So it just shows you how quickly things in Madrid can move. I mean, admittedly, they lost in Lille in the Champions League too, but that was a bit of an aberration, I suppose. But just the manner of this loss, and the way that Madrid collapsed, and the way that Barcelona were able to overrun them, particularly in the second half, it was startling, and it certainly has got Ancelotti under some degree of pressure.
Yeah, I think we've probably seen some of the warning signs there as well in Real Madrid's other Champions League game when they were playing Borussia Dortmund. If it wasn't for Nuri Sahin's absolutely diabolical decision to totally change tactics, bring off players, bring on defenders, and just before the hour mark, when he was comfortable in the game and kind of handed an advantage to Real Madrid. And like you say, it's that balance and finding that balance. And Paul McDonald mentioned it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, that if Mbappe wasn't free, or if they hadn't been chasing him, if that drama hadn't gone on for the last few years, would they actually have signed him? Because he doesn't seem like the right fit. Obviously, he has 8 goals so far for the club, but some of those are penalties. his XG is actually 9.6. So a player like Mbappe, you don't expect him to be underperforming his XG, especially at a team like Real Madrid, who should be kind of serving him up chance after chance. But yeah, and Ancelotti under pressure seems to be the way Real Madrid kind of will work, because that's why they have been so successful. They're under no illusion that a change of coach might be the way to go, and they're having to look at maybe who is going to be their next manager. We had rumours last summer that Xabi Alonso could be moving, and then he decided to stay at Leverkusen, and Liverpool are obviously in the mix then as well, but Xabi Alonso decided to stay at Leverkusen. Things aren't going great for him at the moment, but he seems to be the best candidate out there. And like I said earlier, the Sporting man, the Man United's new manager, he's off the market now. So yeah, I'm not sure where they're going to go with the next manager. And Ruben Amorim, the new Manchester United manager, he had been kind of shopping himself around. He had managerial Tinder dates last summer. Liverpool, West Ham, even kind of was abandoning Sporting to speak to West Ham at one stage, and that move fell through. Yeah, this is kind of a busy time for transfers, and it's kind of heating up at the right time for us, because the transfer window isn't actually that far away. It's almost Halloween, so we're nearly into the final couple of months, so things will start to heat up. And one of them obviously is who is going to be Madrid's next manager next summer. Like we've said, Man City themselves, they've been kind of maybe drawn into this with Amorim now going to Manchester United, because Amorim, he was a potential future replacement for Pep Guardiola, or Guardiola's to leave, and depending on how the court case goes, etc., because Hugo Viana has gone from Sporting to Manchester City, and he could have kind of followed suit, but Man City now have be looking for a plan C. So it's interesting to see how the managerial merry-go-round will go, apart from the football player transfer merry-go-round in the next few months.
Yeah, exactly. And just to touch on Xabi Alonso, you just wonder how much this season is important to him, because obviously Bayer Leverkusen are third in the Bundesliga at the moment. If they finish third, is that going to be good enough to attract a team of the calibre of Real Madrid, who have got such high demands? I mean, it's difficult to see, and there's not a whole lot of high-profile managers out there that, initially grab you and strike you as being a sort of future Real Madrid boss. So it will be interesting. I mean, Alonso too. Real Madrid have often been linked with Florian Wirtz over the course of the few months. Do they feel that if they sign Xabi Alonso, does that increase their opportunity to get Florian Wirtz from Leverkusen? And if Wirtz has been touted as a potential replacement for Toni Kroos, there seems to be a belief in Madrid that Wirtz can play in a deeper role, as Kroos did. So, will that have an impact too? As you mentioned, there's so many different factors going on, and of course it's not something we necessarily need to be immediately attentive to, because Ancelotti is still very much the Real Madrid head coach. But if things continue to go downhill over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, that might not be the case. And as I mentioned earlier, things can change very, very quickly at the Bernabeu.
Yeah, things kind of changed quickly for Barcelona too, apart from the scoreline, which Real Madrid fans are no doubt continuing to cry into their tweets as they say that the Ballon d'Or is robbed of Barcelona fans. And Natalie Portman at the Ballon d'Or ceremony was enjoying life with Barcelona. And Barcelona, the big thing for them to come out from the match was Raphinha, how much of an impact he has had this season. And you kind of look at the way at one stage it seemed like Nico Williams was going to sign for Barcelona, take Raphinha's place. Raphinha was going to head back to the Premier League, was the talk. We spoke about it ourselves on the show before, but that didn't happen. And now Nico Williams is a man on the market, and Manchester United are no longer in for Raphinha. He's not going to be leaving. He's not going to be going to this new United era either. So there's kind of big fallout on the Barcelona side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Clasico was almost definite confirmation of how well Raphinha's playing at the moment. 14 games this season, 10 goals, 9 assists, which is outstanding form in anybody's book. Hansi Flick has obviously gone to Barcelona and changed his position. He's moved Raphinha out to the left wing, made him almost a sort of left-sided number 10, and it's really working for him. And the issue now is, he's in the team. He can't be dropped. Hansi Flick's made him the captain for a few matches. He's under contract until 2027. And how do you fit Nico Williams potentially into that team? It just doesn't seem like it's going to be possible, because obviously Raphinha can't play elsewhere because you've got Lamine Yamal on the opposite flank. Pedro and Gavi are both pushing for game time in the middle. And Nico Williams surely doesn't move to Real Madrid, to Barcelona, if he doesn't start. And equally, Barcelona aren't going to pay 60 million euros for somebody who's going to sit on their bench, because their financial situation still doesn't allow that. So if Nico Williams was to move to Barcelona at the moment, you're looking at another sort of Real Madrid situation where you've got too many players for the team and you just end up unbalanced. So again, it's a very interesting situation to see how this develops. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in Nico from the Premier League. Arsenal and Chelsea in particular over the course of the summer were linked with him. And there could well be an opportunity there for one of those clubs to make a move in the summer, because at 58 million euros, his release clause is relatively cheap for a player of his proven capabilities. And we know he's not hit the heights this season that he did in the European Championships or even last term. But you've got to feel that at his age, he will come back and will become a world-class player once again.
Yeah, you definitely will think that he is, and he will be in the market. And those teams in the Premier League are definitely going to be interested. Arsenal, Chelsea, like you said. But yeah, PSG could be an interesting option for him in France, because obviously we know they have the money. And like you've spoken about on the podcast before, he would fit into the way that they're trying to build at the moment, wouldn't he?
Yes, absolutely. But equally, PSG's best attacking player over the course of the season so far has been Bradley Barcola, who starts on the left wing. So how does Nico Williams fit into that framework too? It's complicated. I mean, PSG would probably be quite happy to get rid of Ousmane Dembele simply because he continues to be so inefficient. But again, how do you fit all these players into the framework of one team? At the moment, it's difficult to see how Nico, of course, is an upgrade on Barcola at the moment, but Barcola is really looking a very strong player for PSG. So I think it would be something of a gamble if PSG were to move him on. And equally, Barcola could be a great opportunity for somebody in the Premier League to sign too.
Yeah, Chelsea were one of the teams I mentioned there, obviously, but they will have the same problem. Where do you fit someone like Nico Williams into the Chelsea team? Where do you fit him in the dressing room? Where do you fit him on the training pitch? Because Chelsea have so many players, and
I don't think Chelsea are too concerned about that sort of problem, are they? They just buy the players anyway.
Well,
work out afterwards.
That is true, but I think that's kind of one of the doubts over why he mightn't go to Barcelona or won't go to Barcelona at this stage, is because he himself needs to see a clear path to the first team or a guaranteed starting position, and Chelsea is not somewhere that will offer that. We saw obviously Marc Guiu go from Barcelona to Chelsea this summer. Hasn't really happened for him. Jadon Sancho had a great start and now is on the bench, and you have so many different attacking players at Chelsea, and where do you fit any of them in? And that's going to continue to be a problem going forward because their squad is just so massive. So you kind of, even though the money is, like you mentioned, the release clause, 58 million euro, it seems ideal for a player like that. I think it's a similar problem that we're seeing to Real Madrid and who they have as their next manager. They have to find the right fit for player and club. Real Madrid have to find someone who suits, but there aren't that many teams that need a Nico Williams at the moment to be their saviour, to be their kind of star player. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who will be able to who will consider making the move for him and who he will want to join, because that's kind of the key factor in any transfer talk around him, is what the player himself wants, because obviously he's happy where he is at the moment and he has been flourishing there, but he needs to make perhaps the next step for the sake of his career to show he can perform at a higher level. And we've seen it obviously at international level that he can, but we have to wait and see how he progresses at club level to match that, because these players are passionate, they're hungry, they want to be the best in the world. And after all the Ballon d'Or talk this week, you have to be at the club that kind of showcases you the best on a regular basis. You can't be sitting on the bench and expect to get any plaudits.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder if Manchester United might consider him as a potential replacement on the left wing for Marcus Rashford, for example. But obviously that's going to depend on what the new manager Ruben Amorim sees as his vision for Man United. We obviously know that he likes to play 3-4-3. He plays it virtually every single match. And how can Nico Williams fit into that framework? If Amorim thinks that Williams can fit into that sort of team, I think he'd be a very interesting option for Man United.
Yeah, it's one to keep an eye on, and obviously the sporting connection, everybody is going to be linking the same kind of names to it. One that we mentioned in the podcast during the summer was Gyokeres. He keeps being linked to the same teams, Arsenal, Chelsea, the teams that kind of need a striker. And obviously Liverpool are in the mix now because they have lots of injury problems with Diogo Jota, and they have Darwin Núñez. We both agree that he is not a number 9 capable of scoring on a regular basis. I know he's getting more assists, but me and you would probably get assists if we were giving Mo Salah the ball, and he is doing the goal scoring. But yeah, I'm not sure he's the answer there. So yeah, Gyokeres is an interesting one to keep an eye on, and I think we're going to see more and more talk of him to Manchester United, especially with the new coach. But how the forwards they have at the club already fit into the new coach's plans, because if you look at the way, like you said, they set up in that 3-4-3 formation, is Joshua Zirkzee or Rasmus Højlund, are they going to get the goals that you need to make that system work? And it'll probably be the case that between now and the new year, we'll see Manchester United kind of struggle to put the ball in the net, like we saw in Erik ten Hag's last game. But it could be the forwards that are struggling to put the ball in the net rather than Diogo Jota. So expect the talk of Gyokeres to Manchester United just to heat up more and more in the next 2 months, I think, because the link is just too obvious there at the moment, and he has got the best of him. So where better next step for Gyokeres to go than to Old Trafford under Ruben Amorim?
Absolutely, and I think it's an absolutely logical link, like you said. On the other hand, Sporting seem to be adamant that they're going to hold out for Gyokeres' €100 million release clause, and you just wonder, can Man United afford that at the moment with the profit and sustainability rules? Obviously, they were a bit hamstrung last summer in terms of making signings, although they did manage to spend rather lavishly once again on players that Ten Hag had recommended, or at least seemed to recommend, given their links with Dutch football. And having sacked Ten Hag and appointed Amorim, and you've got all the associated costs with that, tens of millions of euros, tens of millions of pounds, are they in a position to spend the type of money on Gyokeres that Sporting want?
Yeah, they've just spent £27 million on sacking and appointing managers, and the sound of things are somewhere around that figure. I think one is pounds and one is euro, actually. So yeah, probably 30 million they're after spending on getting rid of one manager and getting another manager in. So that cost is just a sunken cost for Manchester United, and that is not something that Ineos and the Jim Radcliffe and the kind of head people there will need to see a return on. But that's 30 million less that they have to spend in the transfer market. So Gyokeres, if they can get a deal for him, I imagine they will go for it. But like I said, the 100 million release clause is definitely a massive stumbling block, and we've seen in the past that Portuguese teams have learned that they can waited out with Premier League teams for these big figures.
Yeah, of course, and they were very adamant in the summer that they wouldn't accept anything less from Arsenal or Chelsea. Obviously, Gyokeres has enhanced his reputation this year thanks to his performances internationally and in the Champions League, and also domestically. He's scoring a goal every game, which has really put him in the spotlight to an extent that he's not been before. But is he yet a 100 million euro player? I guess it's up to the managers to decide, but Arsenal have typically got things right in the transfer market, and if they're saying no, then you kind of feel that anybody who's going to pay that's taking a little bit of a gamble on him.
Yeah, they are, but like we've seen, Manchester United this summer were a team that were willing to take gambles as the signings they made. Lenny Oro, obviously, Duncan has said it many times on the podcast that he is a big gamble. It is one for the future. So, yeah, Manchester United, under this new ownership, they kind of need to take the gambles because things are going very badly for them at the moment. The decision to keep on Erik ten Hag, to activate the additional year in his contract, that looked even more and more stupid by the week. And to finally pull the trigger after El Clasico, we're not saying the Clasico was definitely the focus point or the cause of that, but the Clasico is going to shake up the transfer market, and we'll see what happens for the likes of Manchester United. Real Madrid themselves, we've spoken about it, they've signed in attack, but they kind of have problems at the back, as we obviously seen. They conceded 4 goals against Barcelona at home, but yeah, they have been linked with full backs, centre backs, defenders. They are a team that are kind of obliged to sign players now, maybe even in January.
Yeah, and prior to the Clasico, that really wasn't necessarily on the cards, and I guess that's why it's such a big watershed match for Real Madrid, because it has completely thrown their plans into the air. Like I said, they hadn't planned on signing in January, and now there's a big push to certainly reinforce their defence, which is of course missing Dani Carvajal, for example. He's probably out for the season with an ACL injury. They've obviously been missing David Alaba as well. So they are very short, and they had gone into the season very short in terms of centre-backs. And this seemed to be almost a calculated risk from Real Madrid that hasn't paid off. And it now means that in January they are going to have to make a move. One of the names that we've seen linked is Aymeric Laporte at Al Nassr, who has been vocal in the past about not necessarily enjoying life in Saudi Arabia. And he's one name that could move to the club. He's still only 30 years old, of course, but there seems to be a push to get him into the club. And of course, there's other names that have been linked to for a longer period of time. As you mentioned, they're interested in fullbacks. Alphonso Davies is the big one. The belief is that he's going to move next summer on a free transfer when his contract is up at Bayern Munich. He's had Real Madrid have had a long-term interest in him, I should say, and Barcelona are really, really struggling to agree a contract with him. I believe there was quotes the other day saying that it would take a miracle for Alphonso Davies to remain at Bayern Munich. There was interest last summer too. Real Madrid wanted him for about 25 to 30 million, but Bayern Munich were pushing for something more like 50 to 60 million, which Real Madrid were never willing to pay. So has Bayern Munich's position changed sufficiently to allow a deal to be done here? With it now inevitable that Davies isn't going to go to Bayern, are they going to sell in January? Potentially, but it would seem that he's probably going to be one for next summer. And that's also the case with Liverpool's Trent Alexander-Arnold, who wasn't necessarily a player that they were going to go and move for. But with it becoming increasingly expected that he's not going to sign a new deal with Liverpool, it seems that he is starting to become an increasing possibility to sign at Real Madrid. And these are two very sort of typical Real Madrid signings in terms of their profile, and the qualities, the attacking qualities particularly, that they would bring to the team.
Yeah, I think with Trent Alexander-Arnold, the big doubt over him is whether he can fulfill his dreams at Real Madrid, because he said just last week, and this is a quote, "I want that legacy of being the greatest right back to ever play football," is what he says. But Real Madrid, as we know, the right backs don't really do right back stuff. They do right wing back stuff maybe sometimes in attack. But if that's, you saw with Danny Carvajal obviously getting nods in the Ballon d'Or awards, that is maybe somewhere you could go. You mightn't necessarily win the Ballon d'Or as a right back, or even a forward or a winger or whatever. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and a lot of people involved at Real Madrid who think they should be the number one player in the world, whereas at other teams it's perhaps easier to be the best player on the team and to stand out and be considered in those greatest of all times or greatest of any single year conversations that it is at Real Madrid. Because as we've seen in the past, Real Madrid is a place where it wins Ballon d'Ors or Ballons d'Or, but this season, and after the kind of pathetic antics of not going to the ceremony and making a big fuss about it, it's going to be harder to win the award there, because I think the journalists at Beaufort aren't going to forget this quite soon. So it's going to be hard for Bellingham or Mbappe or Vinicius to win it in future, or Trent Alexander-Arnold, if that's what he thinks he can do. I think you have to look at Liverpool as well. Are they resigned to losing him at the moment? Because there was an expectation that he was going to stay and sign a new deal. And even when they had a kind of Twitter thread and loads of social media posts about the anniversary of his first game for Liverpool, and they thought that might tie into the new contract, and then it was just the anniversary of his first game for Liverpool. There was no more. There was no contract announcement to follow. It seems like now is the time for them to cash in on him, because unless they give him incredible money, break their kind of own glass ceiling of how much they pay players, and give him an astonishing contract that Liverpool don't usually hand out, he is going to leave next summer, and they're not going to get anything for him unless they do sell him in January. And the same thing can be said for Alphonso Davies.
Yeah, I was just going to point out there that I think when you've got a figure like Jamie Carragher coming out and saying, I think Trent Alexander's going to leave, or more or less saying that Trent Alexander's going to leave, I think that's a real red flag for Liverpool fans. Obviously, Virgil van Dijk is out of contract there next summer, and Mo Salah too. But it seems that Trent's the one who's likeliest to leave at the moment, and as you mentioned, that'll be a big blow for Liverpool because of the free. He's probably one of the ones that they would like to keep purely because of his age, and obviously his ambition as well to become the best right back in the world, in his own words. Personally, I feel that if you're going to win a Ballon d'Or as a right back, I think you have to do it at Real Madrid because of the profile of the club. I think it would be very difficult to win such an award at a sort of, in air quotes, normal team. Real Madrid, as you mentioned, are this sort of special team that have this aura of winning the Ballon d'Or. Obviously, it didn't happen this time around. I'm not too sure that their sort of embarrassing antics will have too much of an impact in the future, but we shall see. As you mentioned, obviously they've got a lot of players who want to win that competition. Mbappe, and I now reckon Vinny Jr. will be going all out to win it next year, if at all possible.
Yeah, they'll just need a new defence to support the fact that Vinny and Mbappe and Bellingham and all are too busy attacking to do any defending. So yeah, that's what we've been speaking about. But Alphonso Davies, from my kind of understanding, is that the money he's looking for at Bayern Munich, like you said, it's too much. It's not what they're prepared to pay, and it kind of ties into Bayern Munich's own expectations of themselves. That's why they were looking for so much money last summer. They were convinced that we can get him to stay. There was a feeling or an understanding at Bayern that the Real Madrid links at the time were kind of a smokescreen to get Bayern to pay up. That that interest wasn't necessarily as strong as it was letting on, and that Bayern could kind of, it was just to put pressure on Bayern Munich to give him this new contract, more money that he was looking for. But Bayern, like Liverpool, they are a team that kind of are very cautious about how they hand out contracts. They're aware that they don't want to pay too much to anybody because that will upset the rest of the players. They'll have to give everyone else increases. They are a team that, aside from a few exceptions, Harry Kane obviously being kind of the most recent notable one, they don't pay huge sums of money on salaries. That's not what Bayern Munich do. And I think there is kind of an acceptance there now at Bayern Munich that Davies is leaving, and he will probably leave for free at the end of the summer. And that is something that they're not kind of that pushed about compared to maybe other clubs if a similar thing happened, because it's happened to them in the past. It's how Bayern Munich, on the other hand, do some of their best work in the market. They find players that are similarly, their own contracts are running down, and they poach them essentially. Robert Lewandowski being the key example, how they got him from Borussia Dortmund. But there's kind of a running commentary that Bayern Munich buy the Bundesliga, and this is how they do it, that they bully other clubs into letting the best players go to Bayern Munich. But if you're a great player and you're playing in the Bundesliga, there's no better place to be than Bayern Munich, of course. It's top of the tree. They're the top of the tree every season, 11 of the last 12 seasons, kind of. They probably will be again as we see other clubs slipping up in the market. But Alphonso Davies, he's going to have to take his medals and he's going to go and find himself a new club, and that new club most likely will be Real Madrid, because similarly that's how Real Madrid operate. That's what they wanted to do with Lenny Yoro. We'll just wait for him to get on a free transfer and then we'll sign him. It was what happened with Mbappe. They could have paid big money for him. They did pay big money for him, but no transfer fee. So Real Madrid will be happy to wait for Davies, and they'll probably be happy to wait for Trent Alexander-Arnold too next summer. It's just whether Bayern Munich or Liverpool want to exchange those extra few months of getting those regular starters for money that they're not going to get otherwise.
Yeah, and I think we have to accept that it's a very distant possibility that Real Madrid sign either of these players in January. I mean, Liverpool challenging for the Premier League title aren't readily going to give Trent Alexander-Arnold away unless they get absolutely crazy money from Real Madrid. And as you've just discussed, Real Madrid want these players for free. So I would be astonished if either of these deals did happen in January. But as we mentioned earlier, and we keep looping back to it, the pressure's now on Real Madrid to do something in January. And either of these guys would be players who could come in and immediately enhance the team and make them challengers once again for La Liga or the Champions League, ideally from Real Madrid's perspective. So while they are absolutely long shots to be done, if Liverpool or Bayern want big money for these guys, it has to be done now or never.
Yeah, everyone's kind of running out of time in the situation, and even Real Madrid themselves are running out of time because they are kind of letting La Liga slip out of their hands. Obviously, the Champions League is a different story altogether, but we've seen their weaknesses exposed in that already. It's just luckily that the pact they've made with the people in the afterlife is going to come true again, and they will magic themselves another trophy this summer, despite perhaps being dominated in many games. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, La Liga is kind of, if they lose to Barcelona, it's kind of egg on their face, even if they do win the Champions League, because Real Madrid have that same expectation, like I mentioned with Bayern Munich, that they need to win everything. They expect to win every competition. The players expect to win every competition, and the players expect to win every individual trophy as well. So this is what Real Madrid are. They are a monster of football, but they need to probably spend money in January, and we'll see what happens. But like you said, Trent or Alphonso Davies signing either of these players, that's a kind of statement signing for the fans that they haven't given up the race for the title in Spain. And it's probably something they need to do now, is to, unless things change drastically between now and January, is to make one of these moves, a big splash in the transfer market, because they can't be seen not to do anything.
And it has to be a defensive player as well, because as we've discussed, they've already got so much going forward. So it's either got to be a defensive player or a replacement for Cross in the midfield. And, you know, it seems that the most logical move at the moment would be to strengthen that defence, where they're not only necessarily thin on numbers, but they're also a little bit short on quality as well. I mean, I think if you look at the way that Lucas Vazquez was destroyed in the Clasico, that's a real red flag for Real Madrid, and certainly enhances their desire to get Trent, I guess.
Yeah, it does. It's obviously going to be interesting to see what happens with Real Madrid and the other teams, the other teams I've mentioned, over the next few months, and how that will all feed into next summer, because the managerial question will continue to arise, especially if Real Madrid don't win trophies. That's what they expect to do, with how long Ancelotti has left, because like we started to show, he is going to be under pressure the more this goes on, so he needs to be back too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't get over how crazy the whole situation at Real Madrid is, because obviously they've only lost a handful of games, but you know, this is the nature of the club. Like you say, they're an absolute footballing behemoth, and they don't expect to lose games, and they certainly don't expect to be getting beaten 4-0 at home by Barcelona. So it's been a real bloody nose for them over the course of this month, and you know, in particular the last week.
Yeah, it could be the week that changed Real Madrid forever. We could be looking back in a few years, and maybe someone will be writing a book and they'll dig out this podcast and like, yeah, they made some great points about it.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thanks very much for your insight and expert European football analysis. As always, Robin, much appreciated.
It's a pleasure to be here anytime.
Cheers. You've been listening to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, please follow us on your favourite podcast platform and give us a rating or a review. Your support helps build a bigger audience and bring you more news, analysis and insight. You can also follow and message us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter address is @TransfersCast. Robin is on Twitter @Bairner. And I am @SwearI'mNotPaul. Our production, as always, is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production, and our music by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
He did the transfer window. He and McGarry, who left us and wasn't known for a couple of years. Duncan was low. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The Transfers, the Transfers, the Transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The Transfers, the Transfers, the Transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. 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 Where everyone's gonna go.